brunch, but when I got there, my world fell apart. "Mom, my secretary is pregnant. I'm going to be a father." That was my husband's voice. "Wonderful. Finally. Besides, that barren wife of yours could never give us an heir anyway." That was my mother-in-law's reply. "They betrayed me. They insulted me. They thought I didn't know. And from that day on, I swore I would take back everything that was mine." Amelia felt the humid New York summer air hit her face the moment she stepped out of the arrivals terminal at JFK. 3 days on a business trip in London had felt like a month. She was exhausted. Her back ached from sitting for so long, but her heart was light. She missed Ethan, her husband. She had intentionally taken the earliest possible flight to get home sooner. In her hand was a small, heavy box containing the Omega watch she knew Ethan had wanted for ages. A little surprised, she glanced at her phone. It was still mid-morning. The Vance family's regular Sunday brunch at Eleanor's, her mother-in-law's house, would be in full swing. An idea sparked. Instead of going back to their apartment, Amelia decided to go straight to her mother-in-law's. It would be a double surprise. She smiled, picturing the shocked faces of Ethan and Eleanor. Amelia quickly hailed a cab and gave the driver the address of the exclusive Upper East Side brownstone where her mother-in-law lived. During the ride, her mind drifted over her 5 years of marriage. They had been happy years, though there was one sharp pebble in her shoe that always made its presence felt. They hadn't been blessed with a child. Amelia had gone through countless tests and treatments. The doctors said she was healthy. Ethan was healthy. "It's just a matter of time, and don't stress," they said. But Amelia knew that for Eleanor, it wasn't just a matter of time, it was a failure. Eleanor never said it directly, but her glances, her subtle jabs during family gatherings, always stung. "Ethan's cousin is already expecting their third, or, 'This big house feels so empty, doesn't it?'" Ethan always defended her, holding her at night and whispering, "We'll face this together, honey. I don't care what anyone says. All that matters is that I have you." Those were the words that always gave Amelia strength. The cab pulled up in front of a magnificent brownstone. Amelia paid the fare and quietly dragged her suitcase up the steps. Just as she'd thought, she could hear the sound of laughter and lively chatter from inside. The front door was slightly ajar. Amelia decided to slip in quietly, wanting to surprise them mid-brunch. She left her suitcase on the side porch so it wouldn't make a sound. She stepped inside. The main chatter was coming from the grand living room to her right, where the brunch was usually held, but Amelia heard another sound. A quieter, more serious conversation coming from Eleanor's private study to the left of the hall. The study door was slightly cracked open. Amelia paused. She recognized those voices. It was Ethan, and it was Eleanor. "So, what are we going to do about this, Ethan? Are you sure?" Eleanor's voice was anxious, but there was a strange undertone to it. Amelia held her breath. What conversation was so serious they had to sequester themselves from the family gathering? "I'm sure, Mom. Jenna took 3 tests, all positive." Amelia's heart fluttered. Jenna, Ethan's secretary. Why was Ethan discussing his secretary's pregnancy with his mother? "She's pregnant, Mom. I'm going to be a father." Amelia's world stopped spinning. The air vanished from her lungs. It couldn't be. Not her Ethan. The Ethan who held her every time she cried over a negative pregnancy test. Her ears were ringing. Then she heard Eleanor's reply. It wasn't anger, it wasn't disappointment, it was relief. "Wonderful. Finally, Ethan, I told you this is what we've been waiting for. Raise that child well." Eleanor's voice was filled with a joy so profound, so palpable, that it made Amelia sick. She stood frozen. The hand holding the watchbox began to tremble violently. "But what about Amelia, Mom?" Ethan asked, his voice hesitant. "Why are you thinking about her?" Eleanor's voice turned cold and sharp. "Besides, that wife of yours is barren. She was never going to give us an heir. 5 years we've waited. 5 years she's wasted your money on useless treatments. This is a gift from God, Ethan. Sooner or later you'll have to divorce her anyway." Barren. The word struck Amelia like a physical blow, hurting more than the reality of the affair itself. So, all this time, behind the warm hugs and sweet words, Ethan and his mother saw her as a failure. "At least we'll have an heir. The family legacy is secure," Eleanor continued. Amelia heard another voice, one of Ethan's aunts. "Oh, let it go, Eleanor. The important thing is that Ethan has a child. Dealing with Amelia will be easy." They all knew this wasn't just an affair. This was a family conspiracy to get rid of her. The humiliation was too deep. The burning pain in her chest suddenly turned to ice, utterly cold. The tears that had welled in her eyes instantly dried up. Amelia did not go in. She would not cry. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Her trembling hands steadied. With a calculated movement, she pulled her phone from her purse. She opened the voice memo app. She pressed record. Slowly, she crouched down. She slipped the thin phone into the gap beneath the study door, just close enough to capture every word clearly. She had to get proof. She had to know the full extent of their plan. She stood, straightening the collar of her blouse. She backed away, step by silent step. She turned and walked out the front door as if she had never been there. She picked up her suitcase from the porch, dragged it down the steps, and stood on the edge of the busy street. She didn't call a cab. She just walked, with no destination in mind. In her purse, her phone was still recording, capturing every detail of the plan to destroy her life. But in her mind, another plan was beginning to form. A much, much bigger one. Amelia didn't return to their apartment until late that evening. She deliberately stopped at a department store first, buying a few things to create a solid alibi. She needed a few hours to calm the storm raging inside her, to turn the ocean of rage into a calm, deadly ice sheet. She had already retrieved her phone from Eleanor's house an hour after she'd left, pretending to have just arrived and asking if Ethan was there. She then said she was just stopping by, but had to leave again for another errand. She managed to grab her phone while Eleanor was busy with other guests. The recording was now safely on her laptop, transcribed, and listened to on a loop. Every time Eleanor called her barren and useless was seared into her brain. When she walked into their apartment, she put on a face of tired happiness. She set her shopping bags in the box, with Ethan's watch on the dining table. She took a long, hot shower. The steam fogged the mirror, but it couldn't cloud the darkness in her eyes. She stared at her reflection. The naive Amelia, the one who always believed in love, had died in front of Eleanor's study door that afternoon. What was left was a woman of steel. Ethan came home at 9 p.m. He looked tired, but also a little on edge. "Honey, you're home," he greeted her, trying to sound enthusiastic as he hugged her. Amelia returned the hug, forcing a smile. "Yes, just got in. Sorry I didn't call. I had to run some errands. How was brunch?" "It was great," Ethan said, releasing her and avoiding her gaze. "You know, the usual. Loud. Mom was asking for you. Why didn't you stop by?" A smooth, practiced lie. Amelia felt a wave of nausea but suppressed it. "I was just so exhausted. Didn't have the energy. Here, I brought you something." She handed him the watch box. Ethan's face registered surprise, then a flash of visible guilt. "Oh my God, honey, you shouldn't have." He opened the box and put the watch on. "It's beautiful. Thank you." "Of course. Wear it in good health. I'm going to bed." "I'm beat." For the next week, Amelia played her part to perfection. She became an even more attentive wife than usual. She woke up earlier, preparing Ethan's favorite breakfasts. She sent him loving texts during the day. She even initiated intimacy, which Ethan received with an awkwardness she could see right through. He thought she knew nothing, and his guilt was making him pliable, easy to control. Ethan thought her sweet behavior was normal. He had no idea she was lulling him into a false sense of security. Every day, as soon as Ethan left for work, their apartment transformed into Amelia's command center. She stopped crying over her fate. She started working. Her first focus was their finances. Ethan managed most of their assets, including several investments in Amelia's name that were part of an inheritance from her late father. She had always trusted her husband completely. How foolish she had been. She started with Ethan's home office. She opened his laptop, the password. She tried Amelia Ethan 123, failed. She tried their anniversary, failed. She tried Jenna's name, Jenna my love, failed. Then she remembered Ethan's words on the recording. I'm going to be a father. Amelia typed, Future Dad 25. The laptop unlocked. Amelia's heart pounded. She immediately opened the banking history for their joint accounts. Her eyes widened. There were so many large transfers out over the last 6 months. $50,000, $100,000, $200,000. All labeled project operational costs or mom's house renovation. Amelia knew it was a lie. Their last project finished 8 months ago, and she had paid for Eleanor's renovation in full last year as a birthday gift. She traced the destination account numbers. It was an account under a name she didn't recognize, not Jenna's, but Amelia knew this was a holding account. She kept digging. She opened the documents for the company Ethan managed, the company inherited from Amelia's father, and that's where she found it. There was a massive corporate loan, approved by Ethan, using company assets as collateral. But the loan money never entered the company's account. It had vanished. Amelia searched deeper in the locked drawer of Ethan's desk. She remembered where he kept the key, inside an old cigar box on the bookshelf. She opened it. Inside the drawer, she found a stack of documents. No, this wasn't about Jenna. This was far worse. There were several statements for offshore accounts, all in Eleanor's name. The balance in each was in the millions. So this was their plan. Ethan was siphoning money from Amelia's company, moving it to a shell account, then laundering it into Eleanor's personal accounts. They were preparing to start a new life with Jenna and their baby using money stolen from Amelia. They were going to leave her bankrupt and heartbroken. Amelia photographed every single document with her phone, every transfer slip, every account number, every page of Eleanor's passbooks. As she was about to close the drawer, her eyes caught something at the very bottom. A fragile brown manila folder, its edges frayed with age. It didn't contain bank documents. Inside was just a single yellowed sheet of paper typed on an old-fashioned typewriter. Amelia opened it carefully. This wasn't a letter, it was some kind of agreement, signed decades ago. Amelia's eyes scanned the document, searching for names she recognized. There it was, the signature of her grandfather and the signature of Ethan's grandfather. Amelia didn't understand the complex legal jargon, but she read one phrase over and over, revocable trust and asset collateral. She didn't know what it meant, but her heart began to race. This wasn't just simple fraud. There was something much bigger hidden here. A mystery involving their two families, long before she and Ethan ever met. This was her first real discovery. This was her weapon. Amelia wasted no time. The next morning, while Ethan was still fast asleep, she was standing in front of one of New York's most prestigious law firms. She was meeting Mr. Davies, her late father's trusted attorney. Mr. Davies was a man in his 60s, distinguished, with eyes as sharp as an eagle's. He had treated Amelia like a daughter ever since her father passed away. "Amelia, what is it so early in the morning? Is everything all right?" Mr. Davies asked, his voice kind but probing. Amelia sat straight in the chair across from him. There were no tears, no sobs, just a disquieting calm. "No, Mr. Davies, I'm not all right. I need legal help, urgently." For the next hour, Amelia laid everything out. She told him about the recording at Eleanor's house. She showed him copies of the wire transfers from her company to Eleanor's personal accounts. She showed him the fraudulent loan documents she'd found. She presented the evidence, piece by piece, on the solid mahogany desk. Mr. Davies listened without interruption, his calm expression slowly hardening, his jaw tightening. "This isn't just an affair, Amelia. This is planned corporate malfeasance. This is a betrayal on an entirely different level. They're draining your company, Mr. Davies said finally, his voice heavy. "Ethan is using the CEO position you entrusted to him to systematically steal from you, and his mother is his accomplice. This is embezzlement. This is money laundering. These are serious felonies." Amelia nodded. "I know, but there's one more thing." She then pulled the old brown folder from her bag and handed it to Mr. Davies. I found this in Ethan's locked desk at home. I don't understand it, but it has my grandfather's signature on it. Mr. Davies took the fragile document carefully. He opened it, reading the faded typewritten lines. His eyebrows shot up. He read it again, then placed the paper on his desk and looked at Amelia with an unreadable expression. My God, Amelia. Do you know what this is? No, sir. Please explain. Mr. Davies leaned back in his chair. Decades ago, Ethan's family was on the brink of ruin. His grandfather, the late Walter Vance, was buried in gambling debts and had mismanaged his company. They were facing total bankruptcy. All of their assets the brownstone Eleanor lives in now, their commercial properties, even their fledgling company stock was about to be seized by the bank. Amelia listened, holding her breath. Your grandfather, Mr. Davies continued, was Walter's best friend, but your grandfather was also a brilliant businessman. He wouldn't just give him a handout, so he did something ingenious. Your grandfather bought all of the Vance family assets. He paid off their debts to the bank. Legally, that house, that land, that company, it all became your grandfather's property. So, all of that belonged to my grandfather? Amelia asked, confused. Correct, but your grandfather was a kind man. After all the assets were legally in his name, he created this agreement. Mr. Davies pointed to the document on his desk. This agreement is, in essence, a trust. Your grandfather allowed the Vance family to continue living in that house, managing that company, and enjoying the profits as if it were still theirs. But what was the condition? Amelia felt her heart beat faster. Here, Mr. Davies pointed to a clause in the middle of the document. This wasn't a loan of money, Amelia. This was a revocable trust, legally binding. These assets would be fully returned or gifted to the descendants of Walter Vance, namely, Ethan on one absolute condition. Mr. Davies looked Amelia straight in the eye. The condition was that the descendants of Walter Vance must not, under any circumstances, commit any criminal act, breach of contract, or act of bad faith that results in material or immaterial harm to the descendants of your grandfather. Amelia was stunned. The descendant of your grandfather is you, Amelia. His sole heir, Mr. Davies sighed. And what has Ethan done? He didn't just have an affair, he embezzled millions from your company. He has committed a criminal act, and an act of bad faith, that has caused you immense material harm. He has just violated that clause. Silence filled the room. What does that mean, Mr. Davies? Amelia asked softly, though she already knew the answer. It means, Mr. Davies said, his voice final, that this agreement is now null and void. The revocable trust is cancelled. And all the assets they were borrowing Eleanor's luxurious brownstone, several commercial storefronts downtown, and the 60% of the company stock that Ethan manages in his family's name, all of it, as of this second, reverts to its original owner. All of it is now yours. Amelia didn't scream. She didn't jump for joy. She just closed her eyes for a moment. The revenge plan she had been crafting had just become 10 times more devastating. This was no longer about a divorce. This was about reclaiming what was rightfully hers. Mr. Davies, Amelia said, opening her eyes. Her gaze was cold and focused. Freeze all of Eleanor's accounts. Prepare a seizure notice for that house. Prepare criminal charges against Ethan and Jenna for embezzlement and document fraud. And one more thing, Amelia continued. I want you to send an official invitation to Ethan, Eleanor, and Jenna. An invitation for what? A meeting. Exactly 1 week from now, in this office. Just write the agenda as discussion of future assets. The week felt like both an instant and an eternity. Amelia continued to play her part at home, being the sweet, unassuming wife. Behind the scenes, she and Mr. Davies worked tirelessly, gathering files, validating documents, and preparing for execution. Ethan, oblivious, seemed more relaxed. He probably thought his guilt had subsided and his lies were safe. The day of the meeting arrived. At noon, Amelia was already seated in the main conference room at Mr. Davies's law firm. The room was immense, dominated by a long mahogany table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Amelia sat at the head of the table. She wore a crisp white blouse, a tailored black blazer, and her hair was styled impeccably. She looked like an executive ready to lead a board meeting, not a heartbroken wife. Beside her, Mr. Davies sat calmly, stacks of thick binders before him. The door opened. Ethan, Eleanor, and Jenna walked in. Ethan looked the most nervous. He hadn't expected a meeting this formal. Eleanor, in contrast, strode in with her chin held high, wearing an expensive Chanel suit and dripping with jewelry. She shot Amelia a condescending look. Behind them, Jenna walked with an air of arrogance, her burgeoning baby bump deliberately prominent. Her hand never left her stomach, as if flaunting her trophy. She gave Amelia a smug, triumphant smirk. The three of them sat across the table. The atmosphere was instantly tense. It was Eleanor who broke the silence. "Amelia," she said, her voice laced with false patience, "I'm glad you finally decided to talk. I hope you can be mature about this. Ethan has made his decision. Jenna is carrying my grandchild." She glanced at Jenna, who smiled proudly. "Let's settle this amicably. Don't ask for too much. You know your position. Just accept a fair settlement, and we can all move on." "Quiet," Amelia said. It wasn't a shout, it was a command. Soft, cold, and filled with an authority that made Eleanor fall silent, shocked. Amelia stared at Eleanor, then at Ethan, who was beginning to sweat, and finally at Jenna, whose smile was fading. "You are here," Amelia said, "at my invitation. So you will listen." She gestured to Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies cleared his throat. "Good afternoon. As stated in the agenda, we are here to discuss assets. However, there seems to be a misunderstanding. We are not here to negotiate a divorce." "Then what is this?" Ethan snapped, trying to sound brave. "Amelia, stop playing games. What do you want?" Mr. Davies didn't answer Ethan. He pressed a button on the conference phone in the middle of the table. There was a moment of silence, and then Ethan's voice filled the room. Jenna took 3 tests, all positive. Jenna's eyes widened in horror. Then, Eleanor's voice. "Wonderful. Finally, Ethan. I told you this is what we've been waiting for. Raise that child well." Eleanor's face went from haughty to sheet white. "And the final blow. Besides, that wife of yours is barren. She was never going to give us an heir." "Stop it," Eleanor shrieked hysterically, lunging for the device. You recorded us? How dare you?" Mr. Davies turned off the recording. "That is evidence of bad faith and conspiracy, Mrs. Vance. But that was just the warm-up." An assistant stepped forward and placed 3 thick binders in front of each of them. "In front of you, Mr. Vance," Mr. Davies began, his voice as flat as a judge reading a verdict, "are copies of wire transfers totaling $9 million from Mrs. Vance's company account to 5 different shell accounts. All 5 of those accounts have been traced, and they all lead to one person." Mr. Davies paused, letting Ethan tremble. "Your mother, Eleanor Vance. This is called embezzlement." Ethan stared at the documents, looking like he'd been struck by lightning. "In front of you, Miss Miller," Mr. Davies continued, turning to the secretary who was now crying silently, "are documents for a fraudulent corporate loan of $1.2 million. You co-signed as a witness, validating a fictitious purpose for the loan and falsifying the date. Your signature is right there. You are an accessory to a felony." Jenna sobbed. I was just told to do it." "And finally, Mr. Davies said, looking directly at Eleanor, who was so shocked she was frozen. "In front of you is a document you have likely never seen. It is an agreement between the late Walter Vance, Mr. Vance's grandfather, and the late Arthur Hayes, Mrs. Vance's grandfather." Mr. Davies explained the contents of the agreement concisely: the revocable trust, the borrowed assets, and the one critical clause. Mr. Vance's actions in embezzling funds from his wife's company, Mr. Wive, Davies stated, have legally violated the terms of this agreement. The trust is therefore terminated, effective immediately. Eleanor stared at him, uncomprehending. "What? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking," Mr. Davies said slowly, each word a dagger, "about the fact that the luxurious brownstone you live in, the commercial properties you rent out, and all the company stock Mr. Vance manages on behalf of his family. None of it ever truly belonged to you. Mr. Davies gestured toward Amelia, who sat silent like a statue of justice. All of those assets, as of this moment, have reverted to their rightful owner, Mrs. Amelia Vance. The silence exploded. Eleanor gasped for air. No, that's impossible. It's a lie. It has to be fake. Ethan, say something. Ethan couldn't speak. His face was ashen. He looked at Amelia, his eyes wide with terror and pleading. Amelia, honey, please, don't do this. I can explain. Finally, Amelia spoke. Her voice cut through the room, cold and merciless. You started this. You all insulted me. You all stole from me. She stood up from her chair. So please, she said, get out of my office. Mr. Davies added. The eviction notice for the house will arrive in 2 days, and the police summons for Mr. Vance and Miss Miller will be issued shortly. Eleanor collapsed from her chair, falling to her knees on the cold marble floor, hysterical. Jenna fainted. Ethan just stared at Amelia, frozen in his own ruin. Amelia's grand plan had only just begun. The conference room felt instantly suffocating. Eleanor's hysterical screams echoed off the glass walls, but no one moved to comfort her. An assistant coolly regarded the unconscious Jenna before calling for the building's medic, not out of sympathy, but as standard procedure. Ethan himself was paralyzed, his tense expression replaced by a mask of utter emptiness. The reality of his total annihilation had just hit him. It's a lie. It's all fake. Eleanor finally managed to struggle to her feet, pointing a trembling finger at Mr. Davies. You're a sham lawyer. Those documents are forged. Amelia forged everything. Ethan, call our lawyer, call the police, have this snake arrested. Mr. Davies didn't even blink. He waited for the tirade to subside before speaking in a calm, lethal tone. This document is authentic, Mrs. Vance, registered with a valid notary seal decades ago. The original is stored in a bank vault under Mrs. Vance's family trust. We have already cross-verified it with state archives. What you have before you is a certified copy. If you wish to accuse us of forgery, please do. It will only add another criminal charge to your list. At the mention of criminal charges, Eleanor's bravado vanished. She turned to her only remaining hope. Ethan, say something. Don't just stand there like a statue. Defend your mother. Defend your child. Ethan flinched. He looked at his mother, then at Jenna, who was beginning to stir and moan. Finally, his gaze locked on Amelia. She was still standing at the head of the table, watching him without expression. Amelia, Ethan's voice was a hoarse whisper. Honey, please don't be like this. I'm begging you. He started to walk around the table, trying to get closer to her, but Mr. Davies raised a hand, signaling for him to stay put. I was wrong, Amelia. I messed up. I'm so sorry. But this is too much. This is my family's home, the place I grew up. This is about my child's future. Hearing the words, my child, Amelia finally reacted. She laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh, but a dry, ironic sound that made the hair on Ethan's arms stand up. Your family's home? Amelia took a step forward. The home you renovated using whose money, Ethan? Money stolen from my company? My father's inheritance? She stopped directly in front of him, the 1-meter gap between them feeling like an uncrossable chasm. Your child's future? You dare speak to me about your child's future? Amelia pointed at herself. Did you think about my future when you slept with her? Did you think about my feelings when your mother called me barren and useless in front of the entire family? Her voice rose, not in hysteria, but in controlled fury. You and your mother planned all of this. You were going to take all my money, divorce me, and throw me away when I had nothing left. Did you really think I would just sit back and take that? Jenna, now sitting up and sipping a glass of water, suddenly understood. This wasn't a simple divorce drama. This was a crime. She wasn't going to be a wealthy man's wife. She was a criminal suspect. Ethan, Jenna shrieked, her face streaked with tears and sweat. What does she mean? You said you were rich. You said the company was yours. You said my baby and I would have everything. You lied to me. Jenna stood up, pointing angrily at Ethan. I don't care about any of this. I'm pregnant with your child. You have to take responsibility. I won't go to jail. I won't be poor. The villains' alliance crumbled in seconds. Eleanor glared at Jenna with disgust. Shut up, you cheap tramp. You're the one who ruined my son. Your son is the one who lied to me, Jenna shot back. And you were the one who told him to do it. I heard you planning the money transfers. Enough. Mr. Davies's voice boomed, silencing the pathetic squabble. This is a law office, not a marketplace. He looked at the three of them, one by one. Miss Miller, Mr. Vance, Mrs. Vance, let me make this perfectly clear one last time. This is not a negotiation. There is nothing to discuss. Mr. Davies picked up the old agreement. This termination clause is now active. The acts of bad faith you committed, the embezzlement of $9 million, the fraudulent loan of $1.2 million, and the conspiracy to defraud Mrs. Amelia Vance have irrevocably voided your rights to all collateral assets. Those assets, Mr. Davies began to list, and every word was another nail in their coffin, include 1 brownstone on the Upper East Side, 3 commercial retail units in Soho, 1 luxury condominium in Midtown that you have been renting out, and, most importantly, 60% of the shares in Vance Enterprises, which means the company is now under the complete control of Mrs. Amelia Vance. Eleanor swayed, clutching her chest. This wasn't just losing a house, this was the complete annihilation of the social status and wealth she had prided herself on her entire life. And as for the criminal acts, Mr. Davies continued, our team submitted all evidence to the district attorney's office this morning. The audio recording, the financial trail, and testimony from several finance employees at the company whom you coerced, Mr. Vance, into processing the illegal transactions. Ethan finally broke. He slumped into a chair, holding his head in his hands. It's over. It's all over. Amelia watched the scene before her. Eleanor staring into space, Ethan destroyed, Jenna weeping in terror. There was no satisfaction, only a cold, hard sense of relief. Security, Amelia called out softly. 2 burly security guards who had been on standby outside immediately entered. Please, Amelia said, her voice calm again, escort my guests out of my building. Your building? Eleanor hissed. Ah, that's right, Mr. Davies added, as if just remembering. I forgot to mention, the building this law firm occupies is also one of the assets your grandfather put up as collateral, Mr. Vance. Welcome to Mrs. Vance's property. It was the final blow. Eleanor didn't resist as the guards took her arms. She walked like a zombie. Ethan was pulled to his feet. He couldn't even look at Amelia. Jenna, realizing there was no point, scrambled out first, sobbing. At the doorway, Eleanor stopped. She turned to look at Amelia, her eyes no longer angry, just filled with a bottomless, pure hatred. You will pay for this, Amelia. You stole what belongs to my son and my grandchild. You will be alone for the rest of your life. Amelia stared back. I didn't steal anything. I took back what was mine, and karma has already arrived, Eleanor. It just seems the summons was sent to the wrong address. It wasn't for me. The 3 of them were forcibly escorted into a service elevator. The doors closed. A profound silence fell over the room. Amelia finally let her shoulders slump. She sat down in the chair Ethan had just vacated. Are you okay? Mr. Davies asked gently. Amelia took a long, deep breath. I will be. She looked out the window. What's the next step? The court-martials are ready. According to our calculations, 2 days from now is the date of the Vance family's regular Sunday brunch, correct? Amelia nodded. That's right. Mr. Davies smiled thinly. Excellent. The eviction notice will be executed on that morning. I imagine their brunch this time will be quite memorable. 2 days later, at 9 a.m., the New York sky was bright, but a dark cloud hung over Eleanor's magnificent brownstone. A large moving truck parked in front of the gate, followed by 2 cars from the marshal's service and a police cruiser. Mr. Davies stepped out of his car, leading his legal team. Eleanor, who hadn't slept and had spent the night cursing Amelia, thought it was Ethan returning. She opened the door, her face swollen from crying. Her eyes widened in horror at the crowd of strangers on her doorstep. What is this? She snapped. trying to reclaim her lost authority. The lead marshal stepped forward, reading from an official document in a loud, clear voice. By order of the court, under execution warrant number 734, on behalf of the new legal owner, Amelia Vance, this property and all its contents are hereby officially seized. You and Mr. Ethan Vance have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings before we begin forcible removal. No! This is my house! Eleanor tried to slam the door, but the marshals blocked it. You have no right! Get out! All of you, get out! Neighbors started to appear on their stoops. Phones began to record. The sight of Mrs. Eleanor Vance, the undisputed queen of the neighborhood social scene, screaming hysterically on her own front porch, was too good a show to miss. Ethan wasn't there. He had disappeared after leaving Mr. Davies's office, his phone turned off. He had left his mother to face this destruction alone. The execution team paid her no mind. They entered the house. The furniture began to come out. Expensive sofas, priceless paintings, fine china. Eleanor tried to fight back, clinging to her favorite antique vase. This is mine. Don't touch it. Sorry, ma'am, an officer said. It's included in the asset seizure. They pried her hands off the vase and carried it to the truck. Eleanor collapsed on the porch. An hour later, she was truly evicted. The officers allowed her one small suitcase of clothes. She sat on the curb in front of her sealed home, watched by dozens of her neighbors' eyes. The news spread like wildfire. The extended Vance family members, who were supposed to gather at Eleanor's for brunch that day, were in a panic. Phones were ringing off the hook. Eleanor's house was seized. They said Amelia did it. How is that possible? The brunch was canceled, but the panic was not. They all knew Eleanor wasn't the only one in business with Ethan. Many of them, the aunts and uncles who had stood by silently while Amelia was insulted, had invested money in Ethan's company. They had been enjoying handsome returns for years. That afternoon, they held an emergency meeting at the home of Aunt Carol, Eleanor's sister, whose house was much smaller and more modest. The living room was packed, not with laughter and gossip, but with anxious faces. What do we do? One uncle said. I have $50,000 invested with Ethan. Is it gone? Our family's investment pool. Eleanor was holding nearly $20,000 of it. Another chimed in. We have to talk to Amelia. This must be a misunderstanding. She can't do this to family. In the midst of the chaos, the front door opened. Amelia walked in. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her. She hadn't come as a pleading victim. She wore an elegant emerald green dress, her hair perfectly styled. She walked in calmly, followed by Mr. Davies. Amelia, Aunt Carol was the first to speak, trying to sound friendly. Thank goodness you're here. Come in, dear, sit down. Tell us what's going on. Why would you be so cruel to Eleanor? She's your mother, too. Amelia stopped in the middle of the room. She looked at the hypocritical faces around her, the same faces that had looked at her with pity and condescension at the last brunch. My mother is dead, Amelia said, her voice cold and clear. Eleanor is the woman who called me barren in front of all of you while she conspired with her son to steal my inheritance. Silence. You were all there, Amelia continued. You all said nothing. You all enjoyed the profits from that stolen money, so don't you dare call me dear. An uncle tried to defend himself. We didn't know anything about that. We were just doing business with Ethan. What about our money now? The company is seized. Is our money gone too? Your money? Amelia gave a small laugh. Which company did you invest in? Vance Enterprises? The company whose seed money came from my grandfather's assets? The company whose profits were systematically drained by Ethan and Eleanor? Mr. Davies stepped forward. For those of you who believe you are owed money, you are welcome to file a personal lawsuit against Ethan and Eleanor Vance. However, the company now belongs to Mrs. Vance. And after a preliminary audit, the company is insolvent. Its debts far exceed its assets. Your money is gone. A collective gasp went through the room. They were all wiped out. I came here, Amelia said, not for a family gathering. I came to deliver a message. She looked at Aunt Carol and the uncles one by one. Several of you rent commercial spaces in Soho for your businesses, don't you? "The storefronts you leased for a bargain from Eleanor." Their faces went pale. "Those storefronts," Amelia said, "are mine. New lease agreements will be sent out next week. The rent will be at the current market rate. Pay up or get out." It was the final nail. Just then, there was a frantic banging on the front door. Eleanor's hoarse voice could be heard. "Carol, open the door. I know you're in there." "It's my brunch day. Let me in." Everyone froze. Aunt Carol looked from Amelia to the door. She knew if she opened it for her sister, she would be defying Amelia, and she couldn't afford to be evicted from her shop. "Sorry," Carol whispered, gesturing for everyone to be quiet. "I don't think anyone's home." Outside, Eleanor kept banging. "I know you can hear me. How could you?" "It's me, Eleanor." No one moved. Eleanor Vance, the socialite queen, evicted from her own home, was now being rejected by her own family. She finally gave up and sank to the ground in front of her sister's door, weeping alone in her humiliation. Inside, Amelia watched from a window. There was no pity, only justice. Her phone buzzed. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. It was his first call since the incident at the law office. Amelia answered and put it on speaker. The silence in the room became even more suffocating. Ethan's voice, desperate and terrified, came through. "Amelia. Amelia. Please help me. I'm at the police station." All the relatives held their breath. "Jenna." Ethan's voice trembled violently. "Jenna was arrested earlier this morning." She panicked. She gave a statement against me, Amelia. She said I was the sole mastermind behind everything. She turned over all the evidence to get a lighter sentence. The police just picked me up." "Amelia, I'm begging you. Help me. I don't want to go to jail. I'll do anything. I'll divorce Jenna right now. I'll get on my knees. Please, get me out of here." Amelia listened to his plea. She looked at her pale-faced relatives. Then she looked toward the door where Eleanor had been weeping. Karma was working overtime today. She ended the call without saying a word. The line went dead. The sound of Ethan's desperate plea was cut off. In Aunt Carol's stuffy living room, the silence was deafening. All eyes were on Amelia, who had just put her phone away as calmly as if she'd rejected a telemarketer. The aunts and uncles swallowed hard. The woman before them, the quiet, harmless daughter-in-law they once pitied, now held all their fates in her hands. She had just left her husband, their nephew, to rot in a police cell without batting an eye. Amelia said nothing more. She looked at each face in the room, her gaze lingering for a fraction of a second that felt like an eternity. She saw fear, evaporated greed, and belated regret. Her message had been delivered. "Excuse me," Amelia said softly. She turned, and Mr. Davies cleared a path for her. The two of them walked out of the house, leaving the extended Vance family frozen in their financial and social ruin. Outside on the sidewalk, Eleanor was gone. All that remained was the faint, dusty mark of her tears. Amelia got into the car. She didn't cry. She didn't feel victorious. She just felt empty. But it was an emptiness filled with a burning resolve. This wasn't over. Ethan was the root of the problem, and that root had to be pulled out completely. "So, what now?" Amelia asked as the car pulled away. "Just as we anticipated," Mr. Davies replied. "Miss Miller is being very cooperative. She's smart. She knows her position is weak, especially being pregnant. She's giving up everything. Recordings of conversations on her phone, private instructions from Ethan, even a diary detailing Eleanor's plan to secure the assets. She's positioning herself as a victim," Amelia stated. "Precisely. A victim who was promised marriage and a life of luxury by her boss. She claims she was only following orders under duress. Of course, it won't absolve her completely. She's still guilty of fraud, but her testimony is devastating for Ethan. Jenna is making sure that Ethan and Eleanor are seen as the primary architects." "Good," Amelia said. That was why the police had moved so quickly to arrest Ethan. Meanwhile, in a cold, foul-smelling holding cell, Ethan was living his worst nightmare. His arrogance as a successful young executive had completely vanished. He was wearing the same shirt from the day before, now stained and wrinkled. He had tried to call his family's lawyer, but the lawyer refused his case. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance. All your accounts have been frozen by court order. We can't work without payment." He had no money, No friends, no family. He tried calling his mother. Her phone was off. He tried his relatives. No one answered. He was completely isolated. There was only one name left, Amelia, and she had just hung up on him. Overwhelming panic choked him. He wasn't prepared for this. He wasn't prepared to be poor, let alone a convicted felon. The next day, Amelia decided to visit. Mr. Davies had arranged everything. This wasn't a visit from a compassionate wife. This was a strategic move. Amelia walked down the busy corridor of the police precinct, dressed simply, her face an emotionless mask. She was shown to a special interview room. A moment later, Ethan was brought in. The sight of him almost made Amelia falter, but she hardened her heart. The man before her was not the Ethan she knew, not her handsome, well-dressed husband. This was a broken man. His eyes were red and swollen, his hair was a mess, and stubble covered his jaw. He was in handcuffs. Seeing Amelia, Ethan's eyes lit up with desperate hope. "Amelia!" he cried, his voice raw. He rushed toward her and immediately dropped to his knees on the dirty floor. He tried to take her hand, but the handcuffs got in the way. He sobbed uncontrollably, tears and snot mixing on his face. "Amelia, honey, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," he wept. "I was stupid. I was blinded by my mother. I swear to God, Amelia, it was Eleanor who poisoned my mind every single day." Amelia just stood there, looking down at him. She was the one who said you weren't enough. She said our family needed an heir. She introduced me to Jenna outside of work. She planned everything. Ethan hysterically blamed everyone but himself. Jenna was a trap, Amelia. She trapped me. She got pregnant on purpose to tie me down. I don't love her. I only love you, Amelia. It's always been you. Get up, Ethan, Amelia said coldly. Her voice cut through his sobs. Ethan looked up, startled. He slowly got to his feet. Amelia, you came to help me, right? I knew you still loved me. I knew you weren't this cruel. I came for one thing, Amelia said. My company's money. $9 million. Mr. Davies's team froze your mother's accounts, but there was only a little over $4 million in them. Where is the rest? Ethan's face changed. He saw a glimmer of hope. A negotiation. Amelia might free him if he returned the money. It's safe. It's safe, Amelia, he said quickly. I have it. I didn't tell my mother. It was my plan for running away with Jenna later. But I can give it all to you. Where is it? In a safe deposit box, Ethan said, words tumbling out as if he were afraid she'd change her mind. At a private bank, downtown branch, it's under Jenna's name. But I have both keys. I hid them at her apartment, behind a painting. I'll give them to you. I'll give you the keys and a signed power of attorney. Why under Jenna's name? Amelia asked, though she already knew the answer. So it couldn't be traced back to me or my mother. The plan was to use that money to start a new life abroad after the baby was born. But I don't want that anymore, Amelia. I want you. I'll divorce Jenna today. I'll sign the papers right now. Ethan looked at Amelia with pleading eyes. Take the money, Amelia. Take all of it. But please, drop the charges. Tell the police it was all a misunderstanding. Please. I don't want to go to jail. Amelia looked at her husband, the man she had loved for 5 years, now begging before her, admitting his plan to run away with another woman using money stolen from her. She had gotten what she came for. Amelia took a step back. Thank you for your confession, Ethan. Ethan froze. What? What do you mean? I didn't come here to negotiate. I came here to complete the case file. Amelia turned and walked toward the door. Amelia, don't go. Amelia, wait. What do you mean? Ethan screamed in panic. He tried to chase her, but his handcuffs held him back. As the door Amelia exited through closed, another one opened. 2 senior detectives entered the room. Behind them, Mr. Davies walked in calmly. Ethan's face went white. He looked at the large mirror on the wall and realized, too late, that it was a two-way mirror. A very thorough confession, Mr. Vance, one of the detectives said, holding up a small digital recorder. You have just voluntarily admitted to conspiracy to commit money laundering, a plan to flee the country, and the location of the remaining stolen funds. Mr. Davies looked at Ethan. "Thank you for your cooperation. With this confession, we no longer need to wait for Miss Miller's testimony in court. You've just sealed your own fate, and your mother's." Ethan collapsed to the floor. He let out a roar not of remorse, but of a trapped animal. He had been played. Amelia hadn't come to save him. She had come to bury him. Eleanor had never known such profound humiliation. After being shunned by her own family at Aunt Carol's house, she wandered aimlessly. Her phone was dead. Her wallet contained only a couple $100 in cash and debit cards that were now useless pieces of plastic. All her socialite friends, the women she lunched with, suddenly couldn't be reached. The news of her home seizure was the hottest gossip in their group chats. No one wanted to be associated with poverty. That night, she was forced to check into a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. The room was stuffy and smelled of stale cigarette smoke. The sheets were grimy. The esteemed Mrs. Eleanor Vance was now sleeping in a place worse than her former maid's quarters. She cried all night, not out of regret for what she'd done to Amelia, but out of regret that her plan had failed. She cursed Amelia, she cursed Jenna, and she cursed Ethan for disappearing. The next day, with the last shreds of her dignity, she sold the only piece of jewelry she had left, a gold bracelet, for cash. She contacted a lawyer, not an expensive one, but a cut-rate attorney who handled minor disputes. Eleanor was adamant. She wanted to sue Amelia. She accused Amelia of forging her grandfather's inheritance documents. She wanted her house back. The civil court hearing was scheduled a few weeks later. Eleanor arrived in the best clothes she had left, which now looked worn and tired. She looked old and defeated. Across the room, Amelia sat calmly next to Mr. Davies, surrounded by a solid legal team. Eleanor's lawyer began with a weak argument, blustering that the old agreement was invalid, expired, and a fabrication by Amelia to seize the Vance family's assets. When it was Mr. Davies's turn, he didn't argue much. He simply submitted documents to the judge. "Your Honor, this is the original notarized copy of the agreement from the public record. This is the validation from the county registrar confirming Mrs. Vance's legal ownership of said assets. And this," Mr. Davies paused, picking up another stack of papers, "is the proof of a $9 million fund transfer from Mrs. Vance's company into the personal accounts of Mrs. Eleanor Vance. This is evidence of embezzlement." Eleanor's lawyer tried to object. "That has nothing to do with the ownership of the house. That was a gift. From a son to his mother." Eleanor nodded quickly. "That's right. It was my son's money. Ethan gave it to me." "A gift?" Mr. Davies smiled faintly. "Your Honor, our client is countersuing Mrs. Eleanor Vance personally for the return of that $9 million, separate from the criminal case against her son. And we wish to prove that Mrs. Vance was not a passive recipient. She was the instigator of this crime." "You have no proof," Eleanor shouted. "Oh, but we do," Mr. Davies said calmly. "Permission to play Evidence Exhibit C, Your Honor." The judge nodded. Mr. Davies pressed a button. A voice filled the courtroom. It was Ethan's. "I was blinded by my mother. I swear to God, Amelia, it was Eleanor who poisoned my mind every single day. She was the one who said you weren't enough. She said our family needed an heir. She planned the transfers." It was the recording of Ethan's confession at the police station, a clear, detailed confession blaming his own mother as the mastermind behind all the financial crimes. Eleanor's face went from rage to pure horror. She stared at Mr. Davies, then the judge, her eyes wide with disbelief. "No, that's a lie," she shrieked, her voice high and piercing, shattering the courtroom silence. "Ethan would never say that. My son would never betray me." She stood up, pointing at Amelia. You poisoned my son against me. You forced him, you witch." Eleanor lost all control. She tried to run toward Amelia, but court officers quickly restrained her. "Ethan! Where is my son, Ethan?" she wailed as she was dragged from the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel. Eleanor's lawsuit was summarily dismissed. The court, however, granted Amelia's countersuit. Eleanor Vance was officially ordered to repay $9 million to Amelia, a judgment she could never possibly pay. She was now not only bankrupt but also billions in debt. Officers dragged the still hysterical Eleanor into the courthouse lobby. She collapsed on the cold floor, exhausted. As she lifted her head, her tear-filled eyes focused on a television screen in the corner. A new news program was broadcasting its top story. The faces of Ethan and a heavily pregnant Jenna were displayed on the screen. The headline below read, "Vance Enterprises Embezzlement Case, CEO and Personal Secretary Indicted. Full confession secured." Eleanor's world went black. The betrayal of her son, the destruction of her reputation, the loss of her fortune, it all crashed down on her at once. She clutched at her tightening chest, her breath catching in her throat. In the middle of the bustling courthouse lobby, surrounded by strangers who didn't care, Eleanor Vance collapsed, utterly alone. Her karma was just beginning. Months passed. Amelia and her legal team spent the time restructuring the company, auditing the damages, and building an ironclad criminal case. Meanwhile, Ethan and Jenna remained in custody, their faces adorning crime reports as the prime suspects in a high-profile embezzlement case. Eleanor, after her collapse, was treated briefly at a public hospital. No family visited. Aunt Carol and the others were too busy trying to salvage their own finances, and they now saw Eleanor as the cause of their ruin. After a week, she was discharged, alone, and disappeared into the anonymity of the city's poor. The trial date finally arrived. The courtroom was packed. Reporters jockeyed for position in the back. The case had captivated the public, an elegant, wronged wife exposing the conspiracy of her husband, mother-in-law, and his mistress. Amelia sat in the front row beside Mr. Davies. She hadn't come as a spurned wife. She came as the primary victim of a corporate crime, the rightful owner of a company that had been systematically plundered. She was calm, her gaze fixed on the judge's bench. Then, the defendants were brought in. The contrast was stark. Ethan entered first, in handcuffs. The once dashing, arrogant man was now a mere shadow of his former self. He was gaunt, his face sallow, his eyes empty and fixed on the floor. He looked defeated before the battle had even begun. Behind him came Jenna. Her belly was now enormous. She was in her final month of pregnancy. She walked with a waddle, one hand constantly on her stomach, weeping silently. She wore an oversized prison uniform, doing her best to elicit sympathy from everyone in the room. She was the very picture of a wronged woman, a victim of circumstance, forced to commit a crime for her unborn child. The trial began. The district attorney, working with Mr. Davies's team, laid out the evidence. Nothing was left out. First, the audio recording from Eleanor's study. The proof of the conspiracy was played, broadcasting Eleanor's voice calling Amelia barren and sanctioning Jenna's pregnancy. Second, the money trail. Millions of dollars flowing from the company to Eleanor's personal accounts, disguised as operational costs. Third, the fraudulent loan documents for $1.2 million. This was where Jenna was trapped. Her signature, which she admitted to forging on Ethan's orders, was displayed clearly on a projector. Fourth, and this was the final nail in Ethan's coffin, the prosecutor played the audio recording from the police interrogation room, Ethan's full confession to Amelia. His own voice admitting to hiding the remaining stolen millions in a safe deposit box under Jenna's name, with a plan to flee the country. Ethan's lawyer, a public defender assigned by the state since Ethan could no longer afford a private attorney, looked hopeless. He tried to argue that his client was under the undue influence of his mother. "Mrs. Vance, his mother. My client is a devoted son," the lawyer exclaimed. "He only wanted to make his mother happy. He was manipulated." The prosecutor stood. Manipulated? Was Mr. Vance also being manipulated when he planned to flee the country with his mistress, using the rest of the stolen money he had hidden from his own mother? Your Honor, this isn't about devotion. This is about pure greed. Ethan could only bow his head in shame. Next was Jenna's lawyer. He played his only card, the pregnancy. Your Honor, look at my client, a young woman, blinded by love, promised marriage by her boss, Mr. Vance. She was in a vulnerable position. Yes, she is guilty of falsifying a document, but she did so under coercion and manipulation. The lawyer's voice was full of drama, and now she carries an innocent child. "We plead for leniency, Your Honor. We plead for probation, so that this child does not have to be born in a prison." Jenna immediately began to cry harder, clutching her stomach as if it were a shield. Amelia watched the spectacle without blinking. Mr. Davies touched her arm, but she shook her head. She was fine. After a short recess, the judge returned. The room was tense. Jenna's heart pounded. She kept whispering, "For my baby, for my baby." Ethan just stared blankly. The judge began to read his verdict, highlighting the meticulous planning of the crimes. Defendant 1, Ethan Vance, the judge's voice echoed. "You are found guilty on all counts of embezzlement, document fraud, and money laundering. You did not just betray the company that employed you, you betrayed the trust of your wife, who is the legal owner of that company. You abused your position for personal greed. Your confession," the judge continued, while noted, "also revealed your plan to abscond and showed no genuine remorse beyond the sorrow of being caught. Therefore, this court sentences you to 10 years in a state penitentiary." The gavel fell. Ethan didn't react. He was like a statue. 10 years. A decade of his life, gone. Slowly, his eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed forward onto the defendant's table, unconscious. Jenna let out a choked scream. She looked from the fainted Ethan to the judge, her eyes wide with terror. The judge turned to her. "Defendant 2, Jenna Miller, you are found guilty of accessory to fraud and criminal conspiracy. The court acknowledges your cooperation in exposing the roles of Ethan and Eleanor Vance. However, the court finds no evidence of coercion. You acted for personal gain. You knew your actions were wrong, yet you proceeded in anticipation of a life of luxury. As for your pregnancy," the judge said, looking at Jenna sternly, "a child is not a shield from the law. Justice must be served." Jenna began shaking her head hysterically. "No, no, Your Honor, please. The court sentences you to 5 years in a state penitentiary." The gavel fell a second time. "No." Jenna's scream was deafening. "No. My baby. What about my baby? You're evil. All of you are evil." Jenna tried to stand, but her stomach hindered her. She clutched her chest, gasping for breath, her eyes bulging with horror. Then, she slumped in her chair, fainting just as Ethan had. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Medics rushed in. Reporters scrambled to get photos of the 2 unconscious defendants. In the midst of it all, Amelia stood up. She looked at the 2 helpless figures. There was no pity, no hatred, just closure. This chapter was over. She turned, adjusted her blazer, and walked out of the courtroom. Mr. Davies followed. The flash of cameras greeted her in the lobby. "Mrs. Vance, how do you feel?" "Mrs. Vance, what's your message for your husband?" Amelia paused. She looked at the crowd of reporters. "Justice has been served," she said simply. Then she walked through the throng, toward her car, and toward her new life. 1 year later, the view of the Manhattan skyline from the highest floor of the office building was as busy as ever. But inside Amelia's office, the atmosphere was calm and controlled. After months of tireless work, Amelia had completely restructured her father's company. The toxic name Vance Enterprises was gone. The company was now reborn as Hayes Legacy Group, the name her father had always intended. Under her sharp, honest, and decisive leadership, the company rose from the ashes of debt Ethan had left behind. She sold all the seized assets, Eleanor's brownstone, the Soho storefronts, the condo, and used the money to pay off company debts and inject fresh capital. Hayes Legacy Group was now healthy, thriving, and respected. Amelia no longer lived in her old apartment, a place filled with too many bad memories. She sold it and bought a warm, beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood. That house was now filled with laughter. 6 months ago, Amelia had realized her greatest dream. She officially adopted a beautiful baby girl from a local agency. Her name was Sarah. Whenever the memory of Eleanor calling her Baron echoed in her mind, Amelia would just smile and hug her daughter. She was a mother now, not by biological fate, but by choice and unconditional love. That afternoon, the backyard of her new home was full of life. Amelia was hosting a gathering. But it wasn't a stuffy, pretentious affair like Eleanor's brunches. Her guests were her true friends, the ones who had supported her when she was at her lowest. Mr. Davies and his wife were there, relaxing and sipping iced tea. They weren't gossiping about others. They were laughing, sharing stories, and enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. "Amelia, look! Sarah can hold her own bottle now," one of her friends exclaimed, pointing to the cherubic baby sitting happily on a playmat. Amelia turned, and her heart swelled. She walked over to her daughter, lifted her up, and kissed her chubby cheeks. She didn't need validation from anyone anymore. She didn't need to prove anything. She had already won. Her life was now complete, peaceful, and happy, built on her own terms. While Amelia was laughing with her daughter, in 3 different grim places, karma was finishing its work with perfect precision. In a women's correctional facility, Jenna sat in her small cell. Visiting hours had just ended. Her son, a baby boy now nearly a year old, was not with her. After being born in the prison infirmary, the baby had been handed over to Jenna's distant, impoverished relatives in another state. They were ashamed and could rarely afford to visit. Today, they had come only to bring her a single photograph. Jenna clutched the worn photo. The child she had used as a shield, the trophy she had flaunted, was now growing up without her. She would miss the first 5 years of his life. She wept in silence, consumed by regret for her greed. Elsewhere, in a grand house in an elite neighborhood she once frequented, an old woman was on her hands and knees, scrubbing a vast marble floor. It was Eleanor. After ending up homeless, the only way she could survive was to work. In a cruel twist of irony, she was hired as a housekeeper by one of her former social rivals. Her new employer, who had always been jealous of her, hired her for the sole purpose of humiliating her daily. "Eleanor, scrub that properly. The floor is still filthy. Do you think you're still a lady?" her boss shouted from the top of the stairs. Eleanor, her back bent and her wrinkled hands raw from the harsh soap, could only nod meekly. "Yes, ma'am." She kept scrubbing, silent tears falling and mixing with the dirty water on the floor. And at Sing Sing Correctional Facility, Ethan sat in his hot, overcrowded cell. He had just finished his daily duty, cleaning the toilets. He looked 10 years older, his hair was thinning, and his body was frail. He had heard that Jenna had given birth. He didn't care. He had heard his family was ruined. He didn't care. All he wanted was to be free. A guard tossed a letter into his cell. "Vance, mail for you. Not a visit, just a letter." Ethan opened it with trembling hands. It was an official letter from the city's social services department. His eyes scanned the cold, bureaucratic words. "This is to inform you that a woman by the name of Eleanor Vance passed away 1 week ago at a public city hospital from complications related to liver disease and severe malnutrition." Ethan stopped breathing. "My mother." He forced his eyes to the next sentence. As no family member could be contacted or was willing to claim the body, per standard procedure, the deceased was interred in a potter's field by the city of New York. The letter slipped from his grasp. His mother. The woman whose ambitions he had followed, the woman he had defended, the reason he betrayed his wife and committed all his crimes, had died alone and destitute. She was buried without a name, in a common grave with strangers. Ethan didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just sat on his bunk, staring at the moldy wall, empty. All his sacrifices, all his crimes, had been for nothing. He was now truly, completely alone in the world. Back in Amelia's garden, she lifted Sarah into her arms. Her daughter giggled, safe in her mother's embrace. Amelia looked up at the beautiful evening sky and breathed in the fresh air.